Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 24th Social Justice Task Force meeting. I will now call this meeting to order. Given today's events, Daniel, did you want to say a few words about today's victims?
Yeah. I think first, before I get into any sort of message about the state of our nation and how we play into it as well, I did want to take a moment, just it's a silence to honor the victims of today's shooting in Texas at Robb Elementary. I believe the last I saw it was 16 children and one adult. Just want to take a moment real quick to honor them. And I'm very angry right now. I don't know how many more times we have to do this. I don't know how many more politicians need to be, use their own personal agendas and take money and not do the right thing to truly protect not just Americans and children, but everybody in this country. Thoughts and prayers for me only go so far. And I would like to see more action. I think especially as voices within our own community, specifically, Task Force Member Desai and Task Force Member, oh my God, why am I blanking on his last name? Why can't I remember his last name? Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry, but the rest of our task, Smith, there we go. It's been a long day. Task Force members Smith and myself, focused on public safety within our own community, but just as anything that the city council can release an official statement that, again, further supports gun control in this country, so that things like this don't continue to happen. We can share on social media all we want. We can send thoughts and prayers all we want, but at the end of the day, to me, that doesn't give these people their lives back. It doesn't give these parents their children back. So yeah, I wish I had better words. I wish I had more actionable items to come out of things like today. But I also wanted to open up to the rest of the task force if there were anyone else who wanted to say anything.
I think you've expressed the emotions that I'm feeling. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. Why don't we go ahead then and honor the victims by going through the Pledge of Allegiance. Task Force Member Demure, do you want to go through the Pledge of Allegiance for us?
Did you want to have someone chair read the land acknowledgement first?
Oh, okay. I was actually questioning, did we have to? Okay. Yes. Actually, Task Force Member Demure, do you want to read the land acknowledgement before we do that? I'll call on someone else to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I can share my screen too, so you can read it, Shayla.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like I don't have sharing capabilities. Let's see, Andy, do you? Oh, never mind. Okay, so it's just this first sentence here, Shayla.
Thank you. The West Hollywood Social Justice Task Force acknowledges that the land on which we gather and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Kizi peoples.
Thank you, Task Force Member Demir. Task Force Member Separak, do you want to read the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah, can you put it in the to view? I can't see it right now. Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Yes, pulling it up now. Weird.
There we go. Task Force Member Separak, can you see it now?
Yes, just put in. Hello. Kind of frozen in my.
I thought I'd give you the opportunity. It's okay if you.
Well, I just hold on. It's just. Yeah, it doesn't move. I just see the first part. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands one nation under God, invisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great job. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay.
And then next, Jasmine, do you want to read us and lead us in roll call?
Yes. Chair Wilson,
Here.
Vice Chair Zamopa,
Here.
Task Force Member Aviles,
Present.
Task Force Member Desai, Task Force Member Demir,
Present.
Task Force Member Morton,
Present.
Task Force Member Separak,
Present.
and Task Force Member Washington.
Present.
Chair, I did hear from Marcus that due to work and obviously the recent tragedy, he may not be able to make the meeting.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so at this stage, do you want to do approval of the minutes? Does someone motion for approval of minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes, Amopa.
Do we hear a second?
Task Force
Second.
Member
Morton.
Aviles, and I second.
All right.
Chair Wilson?
I approve.
Vice Chair Zamopa,
Aye.
Task Force Member Aviles,
Yes.
Task Force Member Desai,
Aye.
Task Force Member Demir,
Aye.
Task Force Member Morton,
Aye.
Task Force Member Separak,
Aye.
and Task Force Member Washington.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Fantastic. I believe we do have some public comment. So this time is set aside for public comment. The public is given the opportunity to address the Social Justice Task Force on any item within its responsibility pursuant to the Brown Act. The Social Justice Task Force cannot take action on any items not listed on the posted agenda. Each speaker will be allotted 2 minutes, and time may be limited or increased based on the discretion of the task force. This public comment period is to address the Social Justice Task Force on agenda items and/or items of general interest within the jurisdiction of the Social Justice Task Force. If there's anyone who didn't sign up to speak and wish to provide comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. My understanding is there is one person that chose to speak. Jasmine, do you want to lead?
Sure. Michael Wojtkiewicz, if you're here, you have 2 minutes.
May I start?
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Michael Wojtkiewicz, longstanding resident. As a person who not only believes in, but strives for fairness, if not for two notable factors, I would limit my comment tonight to only the chair of this subcommittee, given the unexpected and unbelievably nonsensical response received directly after public comment delivered October 26th last year. The two factors are this. First, no member of this subcommittee attempted to correct Jonathan K. Wilson in the deliberate choice to inaccurately taint my comment as if it was somehow a request for direction and or help to obtain services. Second, while Jonathan K. Wilson doubled down in the following month by not correcting meeting minutes, which further mischaracterized my public comment and underlying points of message delivered.
Michael, I'm just going to mute you for a second. So public comment is for comments for the entire task force. I paused your time.
I'm getting to all of the meeting.
Great, you can continue as long as you make the comments to the entire task force, not individual members.
This is to the entire body. If you would listen and you would show some patience, just like back in October of last year, you would have understood the essence and the underlying points. And what you have done just now is to deliberately interrupt me before I get to the entirety. You know,
you can continue.
This is staff which mischaracterized my comment in the meeting minutes. So if I may, I want to start from the beginning.
Okay, you know what, I would like to hear what he has to say, Jasmine, if that's okay.
Sure.
May I start from the beginning?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Again, my name is Michael Wojtkiewicz, longstanding resident. As a person who not only believes in but strives for fairness, if not for two notable factors, I would limit my comment tonight to only the chair of this subcommittee, given the unexpected and unbelievably nonsensical response received directly after the public comment delivered on October 26th of last year. The two factors are this. First, no member of the subcommittee attempted to correct Jonathan K. Wilson, and a deliberate choice to inaccurately paint my comment as if it was somehow a request for direction and or help to obtain services. Second, while Jonathan K. Wilson doubled down in the following month by not correcting meeting minutes, which further mischaracterized my public comment and the underlying points of message delivered, this second chance to set a public record correct and not mislead by adopting further information via city staff, again, like J.K. Wilson, none of you thought an accurate depiction was important, instead accepting even more falsehoods. The fact is this. Comment presented on October 26th was both hypothetical and rhetorical, as it questioned what if building code was based upon the color of one's skin. Anyone would have understood this if they had chosen to actually listen. Sadly, but not surprisingly, members of this subcommittee seem to believe their duties and responsibilities, along with their monthly stipend paid by use of public monies, some way precludes them from actually listening to the public when the person has taken time and has chosen words carefully. Furthermore, the fact I was somehow profiled in advance, given October's introduction when called upon for public comment, framed me as representing the duplicitous and non-accountable housing corporation of West Hollywood could not have been any more insulting. Perhaps a re-examination of your duties and responsibilities is in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Chair, that was the only person that signed up as a speaker.
All right. Well, that was definitely a lot for us to take in. So thank you for your comments, Michael. Appreciate that. Are there any additional public comments that would like to be made? If you want to raise your hand in the Zoom, please go ahead and do so. I think everybody else here is either staff or part of the task force. So, all right, with that said, I think let's go on to the agenda piece, a major part, which I'm very excited about, which is finalizing our actionable recommendations from the Social Justice Task Force subcommittees. Diane, I would love it if you could help lead the discussion on this for all the subcommittees and the recommendations.
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. This is the culmination of a lot of hard work and a long journey for the task force. So it's always good to start with the end in mind, right? Within just a mere few months, your slate of recommendations will be presented to the council. Just prior to that, you will have an opportunity to engage the community in a listening session as they provide response and feedback on your recommendations. So tonight we're at that finalization before you roll it out to the broader community. What am I asking of you? I want you to think about this as an opportunity to practice the discipline, the focus that's going to be essential in ensuring nothing distracts from the very significant recommendations that you are bringing forward. Tonight's conversation really is about each subcommittee finding those most effective, most influential words that capture your thoughts and proposed actions well. We're going to limit the crosstalk and the building on the ideas because you have done that quite sufficiently thus far. There are two things that I'm going to ask you to concentrate your expression or your comments around as your subcommittee's recommendations come forward. The first is, in your own words and from your vantage point, how does this recommendation connect, uplift, advance social justice? The second part that I want you to speak to is, if implemented or if realized, what are one or two of the most tangible positive changes that would occur? What's the link to social justice? What's the improvement that will result from the recommendation? We have quite a number to work through, so I'm going to invite you to stay very focused. As many voices as possible are welcome, but I'm going to invite one voice per recommendation from the subcommittee. And so that means that each subcommittee may have a member take on a different recommendation so that all of you speak over time, but just one person for each recommendation will speak. Okay? Are we good? Any questions anyone has before we dive in? Fantastic. What am I asking of those of you who are not presenting at the moment? Be active listeners. Be able to identify whether there are essential questions that should be addressed or answered related to the recommendation. This is that last piece of fine tuning. So your active listening and your critical thinking and excellent, courageous questions will only make each recommendation stronger. All right, with that, we're going to start with the economic and community development and contracting, or really, we're going to start with the economic development subcommittee. And I'm going to ask the first person to speak to recommendation number 1. So who from our subcommittee will be our first spokesperson to recommendation number 1? Is that you, Jonathan?
I'm happy to be that person.
Good. And before we dive in, other members of that subcommittee who will speak to number 2 and number 3. So we will just keep moving. We won't have a long pause to figure it out as we go. Are there other members? I can't fully see. I'm sorry, the gallery. Are there other members of the subcommittee here today?
Actually 5 recommendations in total.
Okay, and who will speak to the second one?
This is Task Force Member Aviles. I can speak on to the second recommendation.
Thank you, Task Force Member Aviles. Okay, and then any other members of your group here today to take on number 3?
We have Task Force Member Demure. That's, would you like to number 3?
You might be on mute. We're not hearing you. If not number 3, is there one of the remaining
Oh, Task Force Member
recommendations you
Demure is
would
gone,
like to
actually.
speak? Oh, okay. So then we'll rotate back and forth between the 2 of you. Is that okay?
Sounds good. Jasmine, can you just scroll up just really quick? I want to see what 3 and 4 and 5 are, just to make sure we're. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we will start with recommendation number 1, and then just as a reminder, if we could hear your brief but compelling case on how this recommendation relates to uplifting social justice, and then what's the positive impact that would result if in fact this recommendation were implemented. I turn it over to you, Chair, to begin.
Thank you. We all know that we only get what we measure. And this is the first step in being able to measure BIPOC presence within companies that are in West Hollywood. So keep in mind that we want to admin the business registration form, which means that every business that does business in the city of West Hollywood needs to fill this out, need to indicate where there's BIPOC ownership, so we can actually adequately address our BIPOC business owners in the city of West Hollywood. The next piece is to understand how they relate to the BIPOC community. Also, we want to understand what the size of their businesses are. If they are not BIPOC, which is okay, right? I mean, we expect a lot of businesses not to be BIPOC. At least for us to understand the number of BIPOC employees would be great, so we can understand the full count and presence of BIPOC people during the day. The other piece is, or even in some cases at nighttime, right? And the other piece too is from the number of BIPOC managers and above. The key thing is that what are we doing to empower our BIPOC people from an economic standpoint? And so only once those BIPOC people are brought into leadership positions are they really better enabled to be successful and to bring money back to their families and community by being in those managerial positions and above. So hopefully that states what our intent was here. Do you have additional questions, Diane?
If you could speak to, if this amendment is enacted and these data points are now captured and studied, what would be the positive end result?
So number one, we know how to address the community and address the community of businesses. Number 2, this might create awareness for employers to start wanting to have more BIPOC managers, and maybe there's a little nudge to a certain extent for people to want to increase the diversity in their businesses and maybe even decrease diversity at their leadership levels. So sometimes, again, you get what you measure, right? So if we're measuring now leadership and BIPOC leadership at that, people might be more aware of the opportunities there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. We're going to go through the entirety of the 5 and then entertain questions from the other task force members after we hear the suite from this subcommittee. Very nicely modeled. Thank you. Okay, let's go to recommendation number 2.
So this is Task Force Member Vila's recommendation number 2. I think how that would lift social justice in our city. It's because it would give us the BIPOC community a leg up in trying to open up a business within West Hollywood. Historically, that has not been the case. And now the fact that this is a recommendation that I would say when it's realized, it's one of the fundamental ones when starting a business of any kind in any city. But I think most importantly, because we are here in West Hollywood, this obviously would be beneficial to the BIPOC community.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. We'll go back and take on recommendation number 3.
So the purpose of this is really to help enable the entrepreneur themselves, the BIPOC entrepreneurs. Typically, BIPOC entrepreneurs, through several studies, have been shown to require additional learnings. And this is an opportunity for us to make sure that they get the necessary learning to be successful as entrepreneurs and also successful within the city of West Hollywood. And by enabling them and better helping them, we actually increase their loyalty to the city of West Hollywood as well. And then the other piece of that too is it's going to be not just a public sponsorship, but it's also a private sponsorship. So it might have people from existing businesses in the city of West Hollywood also help. The Business License Commission has also been excited about potentially having some workshops. So there's an opportunity to collaborate across the many different task force and commissions in the city of West Hollywood, as well as with private partnerships and public partnerships. And we can actually create a more flourishing BIPOC entrepreneurial community within the city of West Hollywood. And that is ultimately the goal and what this is striving to be.
Fantastic. And clearly the interrelatedness of these recommendations is coming through loud and clear. Let's go to recommendation number 4, Task Member Aviles.
Thank you. Jasmine, can you scroll so I can look at number 4? Thank you. So this, how this would uplift the Social Justice Task Force, this was something that we looked at because we didn't know if there was a business minority certification that happened, whether it be in the county or in the city or in the state. So that was something that was that we discussed and talked about as being something that we wanted to go ahead and seek out and have more guidance on. And this to me, how it links to social justice and improvement is just because it does happen. We know there's certification programs that do happen. So we were just curious in what standpoint, whether it be a nonprofit standpoint, if it benefits them as well, or a for-profit standpoint.
Well, can I add a little color to this also, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Very briefly, sure.
I think for the for-profit community, it is clear that there are certifications for the city of Los Angeles as well as for the state of California around disadvantaged businesses and minority businesses. And so we wanted to make sure that we have reciprocity also within the city of West Hollywood. So to enable.
Okay. Yes, that thank you both. That really makes the point very significant. And then let's talk about the final recommendation number 5.
Again, representation matters, and if we can't move the needle just by asking people to, let's say, make sure we have a diverse pool of candidates, I think there's probably value in maybe saying, hey, what if we said there's a minimum number of 20% respondents to the pool of applicants before an RFP can be RFP candidate or company can be selected as the winner of the RFP. So what we're requesting here is in the instance that you have, for example, one company that responds to an RFP, if they are not with majority BIPOC ownership, an additional participant or candidate would need to have to participate in the RFP process. There at least need to be two, and one would have to be BIPOC ownership stake. In the instance that there are 3 candidates, only one of those needs to be BIPOC to reach that 20%. Again, that holds true for also for 4 and for 5. But beyond 6, you might have to have 2 or more, right? So this would allow to make sure we have some level of unbiased thought on how we reach out to market our RFPs and to ensure there is adequate representation from the BIPOC community, as well as from those that are non-BIPOC.
Okay. I want to thank both of you for walking us through the 5 recommendations, and I'm going to invite the rest of the task force members to take a breath, take a moment, and collect your thoughts. As this subcommittee has laid out the 5, they've made the case on how they link together. And so I'm going to just ask if we could, are there any clarifying questions on our economic development subcommittee suite of recommendations for a moment? Let's just entertain. Are there any clarifying questions in response to what you've heard that helps the heart and soul of these recommendations stand strong?
Daniel, I see your hand up.
Thank you. These are great. Super awesome to see them finally on paper. That's amazing. I think my only question / note is just for under recommendation 1 for number 2 affiliated race standard dropdown. I'm not sure what the city has been using. I haven't seen a drop down in a minute, but I would want to note that there, especially under Hispanic Latino, that there is a lot of subgroups within that to recognize white Latinos, indigenous Latinos, Afro Latinos. So I know, just wanting to note that if there is a space to be more inclusive within that drop down, that I think we should be the leaders in that. But other than that, everything looks amazing.
That's a great point of feedback and tweaking. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you for the note.
Okay. Any other, if there are no other questions, we're going to move to the public safety subcommittee. And let me just say to the economic development, really nice job. I know that there's just so much more that could be said on all of this, but remember, for individuals who have not sat through the journey to get here, they will be well served by that clear, focused presentation that connects the dots, makes the cases, and you modeled that well. So with that, we'll move to public safety.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And for our public safety subcommittee, they have 3 recommendations that they're bringing forward. And so I believe I've seen multiples of you here. So I turn it to you and would love to hear voices as you all see fit. All right. Recommendation number 1, who will speak to that?
Do you want me to jump in, Daniel? I'm happy either way.
Sure.
All right. Will you frame our
Yes.
this again? Sorry.
As you see it, what is the strong link to social uplifting social justice that lives in the recommendation? And if the recommendation is implemented and actualized, what's the positive, constructive difference that it would make?
Okay, got it. So with regards to the first 2 recommendations, but 1A is essentially what I'm talking about. We're talking about cannabis-related crimes and supports related to that. So the reason we focused on this issue is that criminalization of cannabis, which is now no longer criminal, has had a disproportionate impact on communities of color within our own community and more broadly. If we enact these recommendations, we believe that we will do a service in making the wrongs of the past right. We can't fully do that, but given the loss of wages, experience, life, wealth that people who have been criminalized for this have experienced, we believe we'll be setting ourselves on a different path. So the first recommendation being to expand legal services and resources to provide expungement or reduced offenses for nonviolent cannabis-related crimes. There are people who are still experiencing the effects of those. And a related one is to implement a reparations tax from all cannabis-related sales to offset the racial disparity in cannabis-related arrests due to the impacts inflicted on communities of color by racist policies and practices. There have been, I should say, and I think it's come up in these meetings because I think this is still worded as we first presented it, but there have been examples of ways in which I believe the city and state are thinking about this. Maybe, Daniel, it makes sense for us to regroup and just make sure we're also including recommendations to support legislation or policies and practices to that effect. I just want to name that gap.
Very well laid out. Thank you for that. And let's take a look at recommendation number 2.
Sure. So recommendation number 2 is to decriminalize sex work and expand legal services and resources to provide expungement or reduced offenses for nonviolent sex work related crimes. The impact that sex work has just across the nation, but specifically in West Hollywood as well, it disproportionately our Black and Brown, BIPOC, specifically trans, members of people of trans experience who are sex workers deal with a lot more impact than those of traditionally white, more affluent communities where we know that this still happens regardless. And it is often excused because of certain levels of people that partake within these acts. So we just want to make sure that, if very much in the sense of other acts as well, they're going to happen. We want to make sure that everyone is protected, and specifically those members of our community, especially those of trans experience.
Very good. Thank you for that, very much so. And can we hear about your third recommendation, and then we'll entertain feedback or questions?
Oh, this now is capturing. So I didn't see it here. So I was like, what happened to these? I don't know well enough. I apologize, everyone, but I can't recall which number goes to which.
Okay, this is allocate funds to prioritize hiring of, oh no, I'm on the wrong page. I'm sorry. Recommendation number 3, examine and investigate the City of West Hollywood's contract with LA County Sheriff's Department.
I can jump in.
Yeah.
And I believe the legislative bills are in regards to just other items that the city is also watching. I don't believe that it's specific to recommendation number 3. However, speaking on recommendation number 3, especially with more information that has continued to become public information, that the city of West Hollywood's Sheriff's Department is one of the highest paid sheriff's departments in the country. We want to always make sure that we are examining every element of public safety, specifically the relationship that the community has with the Sheriff's Department, and not just the community, but the Sheriff's Department within and of itself. Examining how many sheriffs, how many police officers of color that we have, how many white officers commit crimes or do arrests of BIPOC people within West Hollywood, and just continuing to make sure that we are doing our due diligence, that everything checks out, and that it's not an unchecked system.
Okay, great. And by so doing, just give voice to, if implemented and fully actualized, the positive difference that regular monitoring or examination would yield? How would you express that? What would be that benefit?
Cooper, feel free to jump in if you'd like, but I can also go. What we want to make sure is that West Hollywood is as safe, welcome, and open for community for everyone, regardless of the color of your skin. And we want to make sure that the traditionally disproportionate amount of violence against BIPOC people just by the police force, traditionally in America, but also specifically in Los Angeles, as we've continued to see even higher over the last few years, doesn't go unchecked. And that, as West Hollywood is affluent and diverse of a community as it is, that we don't forget that there is a large BIPOC community within the city, and that everyone feels welcome and safe.
Great.
Thanks,
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you both. Very nicely done. I'm going to turn it to the balance of the task force members for critical thinking and good questions that you have. And remember, the nature of the question is there anything that you would want to ask that would help to clarify or strengthen the recommendations? I see Task Force Member Washington with your hand.
Thank you, Diane. To your point, in effort to strengthen the recommendations, I'd like to see more specificity around expand all legal services, I think was mentioned in a couple of those, and I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Very good. What would
Expand
the
legal services.
expansion of legal services entail? Would either one of you just like to give a brief elaboration on that? What additional kinds of services might be brought to bear?
Sure. I mean, okay, we can tag team this if you want, Daniel, but I think, the city of West Hollywood in many different contexts offers free legal services for various needs, whether it's like tenant support or otherwise. And I think what we're saying is that in the context of this specific issue, we want to make it available in public that we are offering this service explicitly for folks to take advantage of. So I think there's a component of, one, ensuring that the service is available, that we have partnerships and folks who are ready and available to provide this legal counsel in the ways that others have experienced at Plummer Park or otherwise. And also, I imagine there would need to be, and maybe this is something we need to make explicit, a communications effort on that front that the service is available.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing to note as well, like for example, even though cannabis-related crimes, it's been stated that those have been expunged. It's not an automatic process. It's something that we found out. It's something that it's still, you have to go through the court system. You have to reopen the case. So knowing that, while there are people today and who are able to go to a cannabis store and it looks like an Apple store, there are still people who are experiencing the consequences from past related crimes and the legal system. So just doing everything that we can to provide equity within that space, so that it isn't just a it's great that you got to do this, but now you're on your own, go figure it out kind of thing.
Still a legally complicated and layered process. Great elaboration. I see Task Force Member Aviles and then Chair Wilson after that.
Thank you. So I would just like to echo, I think it was Task Force Member Washington who said about a little bit more specifics within your recommendations. For example, the Reparation 1A, implement reparation tax for all cannabis related sales. What is that percentile of tax? Do we know how much do these cannabis companies make, and what would that be a just tax or a fair tax to tax them for them to have programs that could implement in regards to reparations? would be one, because I feel like your recommendations of 1A and 2, 1 and 1A seem very similar. Recommendation number 2, the sex work decriminalization, I think that's super important too. But what does that look like? Is it the sheriff's department not harassing our trans community? Is it the sheriff's department really being a little bit more lenient when it comes to that? Or is the city going to go ahead and step in and ensure that that doesn't happen, because they're not criminalizing, but they're actually decriminalizing sex work? And I would say for the third one would be just kind of like, so for the sheriff, so what is it that we're looking for? What do we want? You know, obviously if it's rotten at the orchard at the core of it all, what are we looking for? What does that overhaul look like? You know, obviously, because if the sheriffs are going to go ahead and pull anyone over for walking while being BIPOC or being trans, you know, what are we doing to protect them, and ensuring that they're actually going to go ahead and because I know that there's sensitivity trainings that come with the sheriff's department, but also like how many times a year should that happen? Because obviously it's an ongoing thing and it's an ongoing problem that we keep hearing. So how are we going to go ahead and mitigate that, and definitely like just kind of stay on top of that, whether it be reporting out or, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think you've described an additional level of detail that you think will make the recommendations stronger. Okay, thank you, Chair Wilson.
Yeah, thank you for this. I think it's always hard to start off with something. It's great. It's always easier to critique something, right? Recommendation number 3, when we talk about the examination, and sorry, can you scroll a little bit so we can look at it? Thank you. When it says examine and investigate the city of West Hollywood's contract with the LA County Sheriff's Department, maybe we need to think about what are we examining and investigating it for, right? Is it because we want to hold them more accountable from a performance management standpoint? Is it because we want to renegotiate terms and conditions? What are we really seeking to achieve by examining and investigating? Are there, you know, what are the desired outcomes of that effort, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. And then ultimately, beyond that effort, what are our ultimate desired outcomes in general, with having the LA County Sheriff's Department having gone through that effort? So that's kind of my overarching thought.
Question for you. I mean, I really liked the specificity. So that was swirling in my head as we were reading out of the first set of recommendations, and the attention to kind of like sort of specific elements of data that are worth gathering at each turn. And I know you were navigating a lot of tricky things as it related to that work. So I don't know if we're allowed to have discussion, but I'd welcome any thoughts that you have, even beyond outcomes, which I feel clearer on, to be honest. Are there inputs that we'd want to examine, or data pieces that we might want to examine that feel salient as you all think about it too? Certainly we can go back and really put our heads around it, but I sense that in the feedback that you're giving and would love to draw that out.
Yeah, I would invite, as opposed to having the open dialogue, I think that's an excellent point, and your openness to that detail is spot on. So I'm going to invite task force members to share that information with the staff and members of the Public Safety Committee. And task force member Desai, I think your point is well taken. When you all hear the area that's being taken on with the recommendation, what are those indicators, those data points that would be very salient in not only advancing the thought, but benchmarking and ensuring change is happening as desired on the other side of the recommendation? So please, the follow-up step would be to do that. Jasmine.
Really quickly, I actually think it might be a good idea to kind of have that discussion now. So that way all of the task force members are kind of present and get the same information. So if there was a task force member who Chair Wilson, I still see your hand up, but if anyone did have a response to Task Force Member Desai's question, we can discuss it.
Yeah, happy to lean into Task Force Desai's question, because I think when we talk about contracts, I think to your point, Diane, it is about somewhat benchmarking against other contracts, but it's also taking a look at what good looks like in our mind for the city of Hollywood, right? What does good look like? So you think about some of the performance management or KPIs, if you will, so key performance indicators that are usually embedded within a contract. So we can look at some of those, want to extrapolate maybe some of those key performance indicators within the contract for the city of West Hollywood, for the county sheriff's department, and maybe want to fine tune those or increase them to make them higher, to have them a higher level of accountability. Maybe that's one of the things that we want to try to get done. So look at the KPIs and not only benchmark against what other cities are doing, but against what the city of West Hollywood thinks is good. And the other key piece is maybe consider additional KPIs that might increase their level of accountability. The other piece is identify a win-win scenario for the contract, right? So where not only, because sometimes the LA, I don't want to speak for the LA County Sheriff's Department, but law enforcement may feel occasionally like they're being singled out or beat up. So maybe there's an opportunity for there to be a win-win in the contract around some of these KPIs or around some of the other clauses within the contract as well. So there's probably a room for us to really look at this. I think examine and investigate is probably one step of many. But I think let's focus on the desired outcome, which is ultimately to have an increased visibility to law enforcement, and also to have lower crime rates. And I think that's something that, and also to make it easier for BIPOC people to exist within West Hollywood without fear of being arrested for false charges, if that is one of the things you were trying to achieve or anything along those lines. So.
Thank you. I think that's helpful. And in the notion of these key performance indicators, these KPIs, the notion of gathering or benchmarking the information on the starting point. So the Public Safety Subcommittee has acknowledged that there is a need to start with an examination of what's happening right now, the total number of law enforcement interactions, what's the proportion that may fall to BIPOC, encounters with BIPOC individuals versus others, and is that reducing over time? Could be a key indicator if in fact this is implemented. If we're talking about, even as it relates to the mitigation of negative and long-term life effects related to the criminalization of cannabis, to what degree are people currently tapping into legal services? And even if the baseline is 0, is that number increasing over time as a result of an awareness campaign? Is that number increasing over time as a result of people having formal legal assistance to mitigate their records and to expunge, past things? So I think just drilling down into the things that would suggest to you we're headed in the right direction would be very helpful.
And Diane, I'm actually taking what you're serving. I love it. The piece that I'd love to add on to that is what if the real recommendation is around having a balanced scorecard of sorts, where we're measuring success, right? What if that's really the recommendation ultimately? So we can examine the contracts, we can have a balanced scorecard that we can actually judge our LA County Sheriff's Department against.
And I do think that the spirit of the recommendations for public safety are grounded really in the right place, because some of the things that you're investigating, no data is being collected on right now. So you're really advancing the conversation period to make the case that these are important areas that require ongoing monitoring and examination, and to pay attention to disparate outcomes, which if you're not looking at it, you're not either self-assessing and you're requiring radical push from the outside to do it. So this would be a shifting of that in a big way. I don't want to overlook Task Force Member Morton, and then I will move to Task Force Member Jorge. I'll move to you after we hear from Shannon.
I also just wanted to remind you all, if there are, if you want to change the language of the recommendations here tonight, what we're trying to do moving forward is to start having these conversations with the entire task force, and kind of updating the language as we go along. So throughout this conversation, if there are things you want me to include in the recommendations, be as specific as possible, so I make sure to capture all of your voices, that would be great.
That would be an excellent point. And for the task force members who are bringing forward the recommendation, to hear from you to the affirmative or not is really helpful as these new proposed elements of language come forward. How does that suggestion sit with you would be helpful to hear. Okay, Task Force Member Moore.
I had a question, but I don't have a question anymore. So sorry for raising my hand.
Okay, no worries. Jorge? Your mute is still on, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not like a question. I would like to have more, prevent. I think prevention will be a good part of this in this situation, because we need to prevent all this kind of discrimination. We want equality. It's another thing that we want: equality, prevention, and other thing. We need to try to find the way to change norms. Like in the way that they stop people. I think that we need to find a way to find zero tolerance for any kind of discrimination in the city for part of the police department or the sheriff's department. So I think that we need to focus on zero tolerance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The concept of establishing the standard of zero tolerance for discrimination and bias in the way policing is administered is what I'm hearing coming forward. And again, ways and methods of making sure that stays on the radar screen and is supported by both internal work within the Sheriff's Department, but also external data that's available to others, allows that to be a reinforced notion. I'm going to go to Chair Wilson and then return back to our members of the Public Safety Committee to get your feelings about the feedback and conversation thus far.
So based on Jasmine's point, I would recommend that we change recommendation number 3 to be develop a performance scorecard for the city of us, for the LA County Sheriff's Department with the city of West Hollywood, and to ensure that there is a reward for positive performance, and there are consequences for negative performance. So I would recommend something along those lines with that wording.
I would remove reward, though. I don't think we should reward for people doing the right thing.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. Sorry, I know he's just trying to throw stuff out, but yeah,
I love it. So you guys take it.
I think I'm open.
Fantastic. And since we've transitioned to that, can we have from the two of you just your general thoughts about the revisions that have been expressed thus far?
I was going to say, I mean, I absolutely like the push for specificity. That felt very clear even as we were reading it. I like the idea of performance indicators. I don't want to lose what the spirit was behind this examination, which is a real interrogation of whether this is a values aligned partnership with what we want and for members of our community. And so I think that's where, sorry, I just keep calling everyone by their first name. Is that not what I'm supposed to do? Task Force Member Wilson or Chair Wilson, was talking about what the outcomes are. And for me, it's like actual safety for our community. Like if you're walking through in whatever skin you're in, that you feel safe walking around this community and that you're not going to be assaulted by the very people who are trying to protect you, right? Mm-hmm. So nor are we affiliated with a department that is acting even outside of our community in ways that we don't align with in terms of the values that we express. So to me, that's like big picture. I think there are ways that we can examine the inputs that are in the contract itself. And I think all of that is right. But again, this is a long-winded way of getting to the point of like, I don't want to lose the essence of what was behind that in the first place.
Yeah. And I think that phrasing value aligned partnership is a very helpful one.
We have to express our values even clear if they're not clear to everybody. But go ahead, Vice Chair.
No, thank you, Task Force Member Desai. No, I fully agree, and I think obviously the Public Safety Commission had just a month or two ago, their official recommendation was to remove 10 officers. I don't think that a blanket recommendation like that is necessarily the answer either, without due diligence of going through and recognizing, like, if we're recommending removing 10, I feel like there needs to be specificity behind those 10. It needs to be 10 who are, are continually, targeting BIPOC community members, or not upholding the values that we as a city live by. Like, I think that there needs to be, it's not just a like, you need to hit these numbers and we did our job. I think there needs to be some sort of language within the contract itself that is like, these are the values that we uphold, and there is zero tolerance. I think is where, correct me if I'm wrong, Task Force Member decided, like, where the three of us, including Task Force Member Smith, I just want to say Marcus, have been working towards this entire time. And regarding the other two, I agree as well. I think with the reparations tax, and the reason, just for reasoning behind why we split up 1 and 1A, I think we want them to feel together because it is regarding the same issue. However, we did feel like if we separated them, we may have better chances of enacting one without, and not having to like completely forego the entire thing if like one portion of it didn't get approved. So that's our reasoning behind that. And then the legal services, just so you're all aware, actually speaking to sex workers has been an incredibly difficult task to accomplish. We have reached out to the LA LGBT Center. I've reached out to people in my own personal circle. It's something that I want to continue, especially as we continue talking about, well, what do we as a task force continue to do past submitting these recommendations? I don't think that this, again, I think all of these things, but specifically the ones within public safety, are just ongoing. And as we continue to make more headway, and it's not just this is our recommendation and that's it, we did our job, is sort of how we wanted to frame these. But we're still working. we're still knocking at it.
Very good. And excellent points you make there. In that continuous outreach, I would just mention that a great linkage for direct input that's been captured from sex workers. A resource may be grounded in the LA County Commission for HIV, only because STDs and HIVs prevention and treatment required a full kind of almost census taking of sex workers, and tapped into sources that allowed them to get into a large swath of the population and hear directly from their voices. So just a resource for your info. All right. Excellent conversation, excellent work. Are you ready? Our third subcommittee, we're going to housing and homelessness
Sorry,
subcommittee.
Diane, can I ask a quick question? I just want to make sure, in light of the suggestion that Chair Wilson had, and the response that Task Force Member Desai and Vice Chair Similpa made, were there any changes that you all wanted to make for recommendation 3? It sounds like you kind of wanted to keep it as is, but did you want to add on?
I'm really bad at workshopping in groups, workshopping language in groups. I apologize, but that's what I'm struggling with right now. But I'm like, yeah.
Is there opportunity to go back to one more subcommittee meeting and we can work that one out?
Sure.
Task Force Member decide if you're open to doing one more meeting.
Yes. Yeah, of course. I absolutely understand the push to move us and have the discussion full group. And I can't process that fast, candidly, right now.
Totally fine.
Right there with you.
Yes and yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Housing and Homelessness Subcommittee, and our group is bringing forward 3 recommendations as well. And so I turn to you, whoever's ready to speak.
I'll start.
Recommendation 1. Okay, Task Force Member Morton.
So for all of you, recommendation 1 from the Housing and Homelessness Subcommittee would be to allocate funds for interim temporary shelter. We know that West Hollywood is working very diligently to secure home key funding so that they can rent out the Holloway Hotel. But if for some reason that didn't work, we really wanted there to be something more immediate, since it might take 8 to 12 months. So we were looking for funds to be earmarked in the event that the city isn't able to secure that state funding and resources. I think that this is really necessary because, as we know, when we talk about social justice, Black and Brown people, wealth isn't distributed equally, opportunity isn't distributed equally, privilege. But I think by starting here and giving people even temporary housing would be, it's really key and necessary. And I think the neighbors would be happy, and the members of West Hollywood or the unhoused community in West Hollywood would be really fortunate to have that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I think there's a through line in your at least recommendation number 1 and number 2. So let's entertain recommendation number 2 from a member of the group.
Yeah, I take in number 2, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were thinking in allocate funds for to find a safe place for the homeless. We were thinking in the Poinsettia Park or Plummer Park. This is an area that it would be appropriate for this group, because we were thinking that this is a place right now in the West Hollywood City Hall. It would be at the City Hall, no, in the library. That would be a kind of difficult, no welcoming to this small community. So we thought in a place in Plummer Park, because we saw that is the area that most of the homeless, trying to go, because they have some service like a food for fun Sundays. So they are familiar already with that area. So we want this community to feel welcome, to don't have to pass for any bad moment. And I think it's the moment to do it because, you know, like any political campaign right now, the first thing that we hear is like everybody's trying to find a solution for the homeless community right now. I think that we don't have to wait to any candidate to win. We can start doing that right now. I think, yeah, I think that we were talking in all these meetings for all this time. We're investigating and doing our, you know, our homework. I hope that we can reach that goal to finally get a small solution, because we know this is a big problem, not just in West Hollywood, it's all the city and all USA.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And let's take on recommendation number 3 and then open it up for questions and feedback.
Recommendation number 3 is to allocate funds to prioritize hiring of diverse staff to support the West Hollywood 5-year plan to address homelessness in our community. Social justice highlights justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. By hiring our diverse staff will limit the number of touch points staff would have with the homeless community, and of course, provide job opportunities as well.
Great. And so let's open it up for questions and feedback. And I see your hand, Chair Wilson.
Yeah, so I like the vein of, I like these recommendations. My question right now though is, how can we also take into account, I've been hearing more and more about this, about people that are more on the fence of becoming homeless. How do we address that population? There are people that are getting turned away time and time again from cities, saying that they haven't been homeless long enough, or that they don't have mental illnesses, so they aren't eligible for services. You also have the working homeless, right? So people that are actually living in their cars, but they're working, and somehow they aren't eligible always for services also. So my question to you is, there's this in-between population that we seem to forget about. And is there room to be able to evolve our recommendations to incorporate that group of people?
Great. Thank you. I'm going to take that and hold it for response in just a moment. Vice Chair?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Actually, kind of piggybacking off of Chair Wilson, I wonder if maybe there is another recommendation under economic development where businesses are given either incentives, or there's a program in which we are able to help employ people who are unhoused or close to experiencing being unhoused. Just thinking, you know, outside of, you know, like what are the other things that we can do to help bridge that gap?
Okay, wonderful. I'd like to circle back to the subcommittee members and get your thoughts about these 2 issues as it relates to that, you know, population that sits in high vulnerability to becoming unhoused, and how that is connected even to life-sustaining elements like employment for them. What are your thoughts on that? Yes, Task Member Washington, let's start with you.
Thank you. I think we have an opportunity to add that to recommendation number 2, thinking about the park being a hub for resources. So working homeless or folks in that transitionary stage, or even preventing homelessness in their life, information could be found there. But I love that, Jonathan. Thank you.
Okay, so through an expansion on recommendation number 2, and do you have just even some suggestive wording of how you might want to add that in there? Task Force Member
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Jonathan. I also think when we're expanding and thinking of, if people are living in their cars or people who are on the brink of becoming homeless, we look at what we're doing for rental assistance that can go into wraparound services. But when we're already looking at with recommendation 1 as well, temporary like vouchers, or we're looking at parcels of land. I know in Studio City, they did parking lot where if you were sleeping in your car, it was a safe space, you wouldn't be towed. We could look into things like that for them as well, while trying to find this temporary housing.
And would you see that as an additional recommendation, or are you in alignment with Task Force Member Washington? Is that an expansion on recommendation number 2?
I definitely think we could add it into 2 or even 1 if we wanted to do, because it does fall under temporary and immediate, something that we could do along those lines, I think.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you all 3 of you for bringing those forward. Any other thoughts or questions related to the 3 recommendations? Yes, Task Force Member Washington.
Question for Jasmine.
Yes.
Can we follow up an email with our additions?
Normally I would say yes, but because this is something you all will be voting on and approving, it's probably better if we schedule a subcommittee meeting and kind of have that discussion, as opposed to, you sending me an email and then Task Member Morton responding, and then it kind of going back and forth from there.
Mhm.
I'm Task Member Morton and Separat. Are you okay adding the sentence that says wraparound services will include preventive measures and something like catering to all types of unhoused communities? Thank you, Jasmine. Wraparound services will include preventative measures and
Yes. I think that was the original idea. It was not just because the service we're trying to find is not just for homeless. We're trying to prevent homelessness too. Or having a place when they can have everyone can have that kind of information. It would be the goal. So over there can have, like we can focus. We don't have to focus just on people that don't have a place already. We can try to get all the information from people that, like they say, people sleeping in the car, people that are having a job, people just need a place where they can change his clothes, everything, This is, of course, is for, I think in the recommendation number 2, this will fit there perfectly. But at the same time, I think having the place is the goal. After that, we can move things around to try and even donations, like we have another note over there. We just need to find the place that we can use as a point where everybody can go there for that help.
Okay. All right. Jasmine, do you have a
Yeah, I wanted to
something you want to say before we go to Task Force Member Aviles? And I do see your hand. We'll come to you right after Jasmine.
So I just wanted to give Task Force Member Washington a minute to kind of finish that sentence, but also maybe just remind you all that the recommendations should be as direct and succinct as possible. So maybe this recommendations, from what I'm hearing, maybe there's a possibility that we add another recommendation that actually is a bit more direct and speaks to some of the things and feedback that Chair Wilson and Vice Chair Zamelpa and other folks have mentioned. Just a suggestion.
Okay, great. And we'll circle back, give you subcommittee members a chance to turn that over in your thinking, and we'll come back to you to weigh in on that. Task Force Member Aviles?
Thank you. So just really quick for recommendation number 1, is there a component of where if we do have this housing for the Holloway Hotel, if there is some, obviously mental health issues, are there going to be people there who are going to be treated when they go there? How is that going to work?
They'll have wraparound services. They've dedicated like 3 rooms it's a 23-room building. They have 3 rooms, and it's supposed to have all of the wraparound services and things like that as well, to my knowledge.
And it's a great question. This just speaks to what will probably be a final screen to all of the recommendations, is that in some cases, there are efforts from other city departments underway that hold the details, hold the specifics that you just inquired about. And to the degree possible, it's going to be valuable if you as a task force or a subcommittee endorse what's being suggested, that you're explicit in stating that, even as you advance additional thoughts in the form of this task force's recommendations. Okay, I want to come back to our 3 subcommittee members and get your thoughts and reactions to the suggestions that have come your way thus far.
And Task Force Member Washington, let me know if you want me to add on that sentence.
And I think there was some suggested wording in the chat. Jasmine, I don't know if you've had a chance to tap into that.
Oh, yikes, that should be disabled, but yes, let me do that.
Okay. For our housing and homelessness subcommittee members, a couple of questions for your thoughts and reactions.
And just to avoid kind of a Brown Act, I think maybe we should probably just read out what's in the chat. So in the chat, what was put in there, it says will include preventative measures and information for those who may become homeless. So
thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. Any concluding thoughts or comments from the 3 of you?
I thought it was great feedback.
Great. I see the nonverbal agreement on that. Jasmine, anything additional that would be helpful to you?
I would say I will probably reach out this week to schedule subcommittee meetings so we can kind of debrief and take into account everything that we've discussed tonight. And for the next Social Justice Task Force meeting, have an updated list of the recommendations to review.
Fantastic. Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, Jasmine, my understanding is that we want to have these finalized in the next meeting, right? Like that we would vote to approve them. So whatever is presented in that meeting is going to be voted on. Is that the goal?
I think the goal is to be moving in that direction, right? So if you all make a lot of headway in that June meeting and have to kind of take one final look in July and finalize, we can always kind of work with the task force.
Cool.
Right. And great work tonight. The notion is the level of refinement that allows you to move this out of the task force and into the broader community with confidence, knowing that what you are bringing forward is clear, but it's also compelling. It makes the link to how social justice is served by taking these types of acts. It talks about and makes clear to the community, and we often say, does the community member see themselves in your recommendation? Do they see their needs being served by your recommendations? Is the city made better, not just for the moment, but for the long term as a result of your recommendations? And so this process that you went through tonight helps in getting to that refinement, the engagement with the community members. As you go into a listening session in the future, it will be not to, do a whole lot of presenting, but just to hear the community members react as they ingest your recommendations. And ultimately that final tweaking allows you to bring forward to council that which you feel very, very strongly is grounded in the change you want. Okay, thank you for your great work tonight, and I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you for your great work tonight. As for the community listening date, I think we're on item number 7 of the agenda. So Jasmine, do you want to lead us in discussion around that? Or should I be the one leading?
Sure, no, it's no problem. Sorry, there was a helicopter and I was trying to avoid.
Oh, okay, got it.
So as follow-up from the last, I think our previous meeting, we had a conversation around planning a community listening session, or maybe multiple community listening sessions. So we had the idea to have that conversation tonight and figure out if you all wanted to select a date or maybe multiple dates. There is the suggestion that you all could, and I was going to bring this up in the items from staff agenda item, but due to the rising cases, the June meeting will actually be held via teleconference. So there's a possibility that you all could have one community listening session that is virtual, and then one that is in person. That's just an idea, but I also want to make sure you all remember that your recommendations don't necessarily have to be final, because keep in mind, you will want to implement some of the feedback that you get from the community during the listening sessions. So don't put too much pressure on yourselves to make them perfect, but make sure that they kind of reflect all of the meetings and information that we've had thus far. But you will have an opportunity after the listening sessions to kind of reshape as well.
Jasmine, I have a question. What have the community listening sessions looked like in the past? Is there an invite? Is it a selected group? Or are there certain people that are invited? How does that work?
So usually any meeting that the city puts forth is public. So everyone is welcome and open to attend. I think they've been handled in a few different ways in the past, but staff is recommending that we really make the main focus a listening session. So we may have Diane assist us in leading some prompts that kind of encourage the conversation, ask people if if the values represented within social justice are reflected within the recommendations, if there are things that they feel that you all may have missed or need to incorporate. But the goal of the listening session will just be for community members to give their feedback to you all. It won't be a discussion it would more so, I guess you could kind of treat it like an extended public comment, right? So they'll provide their input on the recommendations. You all will say thank you. And then we'll schedule another meeting to kind of debrief and have that discussion. So the focus is really on giving the community members time to provide input.
Thank you. And Jasmine, if I could just offer and add that these are most successful when you all as task force members have a very active role in the outreach and making sure people know about the session, encouraging people to attend the session, because attendance doesn't just automatically happen. So if there's enough advance time to do this, we would strongly be asking you to reach out to your networks and make sure that they are aware, that they're motivated to attend. And it's not just to rally for one thing or the other. You just want authentically people to show up and speak to what they see as true and necessary from their vantage point. So that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Diane. I also forgot to mention, we will work with our communications department to make sure a press release goes out. So we'll be able to market in that way as well.
And I have a question kind of along the same lines as Vice Chair Zamilpa. If we hear the recommendations, it might be kind of difficult for us to then turn around and try to edit them right after we have the community listening sessions, because we might want to digest what they're saying. So my question to you is, would we separate, we have a community listening session, then have a session where we ideate or evolve the recommendations, and then we send them off to the council? Is that kind of the thought process?
I'm sorry, Chair. For some reason, you cut out for a second. You mind just repeating that?
Yeah, no. Would we actually would we have a session focused on evolving our recommendations in a separate session following the community session, and then it goes to City Council? Okay, got it.
Correct. Yeah, so yeah, we would create a meeting, schedule a meeting for you all to finalize the recommendations after the listening sessions. And then you would vote on them and approve them.
So I like the idea. I mean, I like the idea of making the next two meetings listening sessions, the one in June and the one in July. And then if we have like special meetings to evolve our recommendations after those, and then submit them to council for the August meeting. I mean, I think that seems like a good run of show to me. What do you guys think?
Do we think 2 is necessary?
Well, one would be in virtual and one would be in person. But you know what? To your point, I'm okay with just one. I mean, you know.
One virtual one, and then we can get moving? I don't know.
You're like, let's just get to the okay. So I'm not, hey, you know, and I'm with you. Okay, so then I hear a motion to, so I will hereby make a motion to have one listening session. And that will be, why don't we do July? Do you want to do the July meeting? And that way we're able to evolve everything, or do you want to make it the June meeting?
I think the July meeting, yeah.
Okay. Then I hereby make a recommendation that we make one listening session for the July 26th meeting, and then we evolve our recommendations through a special meeting to get them over to council for the August City Council meeting. So can I get a second?
And just to be clear, that the July 26th listening session will be in person or virtual?
Virtual.
Virtual. Okay. So then I will refine that recommendation. I hereby recommend that we have a July 26th virtual session for the community to provide feedback on our recommendations. And therefore, we will also follow it with a special session for all of the social justice task force members to finalize recommendations before sending it to city council in August. Is there a second?
Second, Zamilpa.
I do think, respectfully, I do think that a in-person meeting might lend for people to feel a bit more comfortable kind of expressing that, and especially since a lot of community members have not met all of you. I think that's why as staff, we were recommending maybe a virtual session for the folks who may not feel comfortable attending in person, maybe for COVID reasons or due to their schedule, and then maybe doing an in-person. But I do think that I just wanted to throw that out there. But as
Well, we'll
staff,
talk about that.
I take direction from all of you. So
Anybody have additional thoughts in a similar vein to Jasmine?
Why don't we do the June meeting in virtual and then the July meeting in person, just as it's in the agenda?
I don't think it's an agenda that way, but I think your point's taken.
It is.
Does it say June and does it say June virtual? Okay, maybe I missed it. Okay, so then let's just make a motion to do a
sorry,
June.
Chair. I see before you continue the motion, I see Andy's hand up.
Oh, Andy. Hi, Andy.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to point out that the listening session doesn't have to be at your regularly scheduled meeting. So if Task Force Member Morton, or if any of the concerns about the length of time that it would take to have two sessions, if it's because you're waiting for, once a month, it doesn't have to be that way. So just wanted to throw that out there because, once you say you want to do it in July, and then we'll all regroup in August and you all will finalize, and then we would be able to take it to council in September at that point. So if you wanted to have the listening sessions in July and then regroup at your July meeting and talk about it, then we could have it go to council in August. But again, like Jasmine said, it's up to you all.
Just to note that some people may be traveling in July or not. Summer is a hard time a lot of times with kids and everything else. So just we need to be cognizant of that, knowing that July 4th exists.
Can we just like to brass tacks, like when's the city council meeting, like backwards map from if we wanted to hit August to Shannon's point to kind of like get this, show on the road. We're backing out of that. We need a special meeting, to Andy's point, if we want to do, off cycle listening sessions. Can we, what are our options? I hear you, Chair, about summer being challenging, but without actually looking at kind of weeks, it's hard to.
So for specific days, the second meeting in August is August 15th for the council meeting. Okay. We have our staff report timeline for preparation is basically 2 weeks before the meeting.
I see.
So your last meeting in July is on the 26th. So that would be probably the latest that we could finalize something to meet the August agenda.
Which would mean that we'd have to have two listening sessions before July 26th.
Yeah. And we can bring the item to council in September. There's no reason not to do that. I just thought there was someone voiced that they wanted it to go in August. So I just wanted to be realistic that, if you want to do the listening sessions in July or August, that's fine. But then we would plan to bring the item to council in September.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of with Councilmember Morton. Let's get the show on the road. So maybe then I don't know, throw it out there. What if we do a listening session then June, and then we do an in-person special session during the week of the 11th of July, sorry.
The week of July 11th, I am out of office.
Or what if we do, well, I guess we can't do the in-person in June, so because of the decision's already been made.
Yeah, and I think with June, there's just so many Pride things that are already booked. It'd probably be difficult to get people anywhere.
So maybe what we can do, and maybe I have a question then, Jasmine. Could we keep the in-person session for that July 26th and then have a second meeting on the 27th of July to finalize the recommendations? Just have a back-to-back, one day being, would that be possible? Because August is the deadline for getting recommendations in.
So just to schedule the listening session for July 26th and then a special meeting for July 27th.
Right, but also use the June 26th one for the virtual listening session.
Okay. Virtual June 26th, in-person July 26th, special meeting on July 27th.
What do you guys think about that?
Wondering if we do the special meeting either the 28th, that Thursday, or hold it to that next Tuesday, the 2nd, just to give people time to digest what we had listened to the day before.
August 1st is the deadline for.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I mean, 28th is not a bad idea. I'm not opposed to that if the team isn't.
I won't be available on the 28th. I have another meeting that day.
That evening?
Thursday. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And just so we're clear, I can only attend virtual all of July and August, so I'm probably going to be out. So you guys do whatever is best for you.
Okay. So, I mean,
I open.
Yeah. So why don't maybe we say? I mean, are you going to be able to be a listening session? Are you going to be able to be a listening session on the 26th, and then task force member Avalos, would you be able to be at the in-person in July?
Yes.
So then maybe what we do is we still have the 28th to allow people to digest, but then if you can provide your feedback maybe to Jasmine, if you have some additional things, maybe Jasmine, is that okay for people that are not going to be there present? Because we do want to make sure all voices are heard. Is that something that you'd be comfortable with, Jasmine?
Sure. Did we already throw out the possibility of doing the listening session on the week of July 18th, or was someone unavailable?
I'm just unavailable the week before, but I can do the week of the 18th.
I mean, that way it kind of pushes up the schedule a bit. So
listening session, maybe the 19th, keep our regular meeting on the 26th.
Yep.
So what I have the virtual listening session is on June 26th, in person on July 18th. I don't think we picked
July 19th.
That's just the week. So July 19th. Let me make sure there's nothing on the calendar.
I like the idea, Daniel, of consistency around Tuesdays. I think we've all now done that in our minds.
Except that one meeting that I did not realize it was on Monday.
I'm just going to double check the city calendar and make sure there are no conflicts that I see. Okay, so it looks like there is there are a couple meetings. I think we should be okay, but I'll defer to Andy and just double check. There's a Human Services Commission meeting, special meeting on the 19th at 6 p.m. and then the Russian Advisory Board meeting that same day.
We can check in with the staff, but I think it would be okay.
So do we need to have a backup date then?
Yeah, so let's have a tentative date of the 19th is the first option. And then does the
20th?
Would the 20th work as a backup date?
Sure, we'll make it work.
Great.
All right, so then, so just to be clear, so the motion now is to have a virtual listening session on the June 26th, June 28th meeting. And we will then have a in-person listening session with the community on the 19th. Ideally, if that date doesn't work out, it'll be on the 20th. However, we will nonetheless refine our recommendations on Tuesday, July 26th, so we can have them submitted in time for staff to be able to include in the agenda for the August City Council meeting. Does that sound correct?
I think that sounds good. I don't know if we need to include the July 26th part just because that's a regularly scheduled meeting, but just so everyone is aware that that meeting will be reserved for debriefing about the listening sessions. That's good.
Perfect. Okay, so we're on the same page then. Anybody want to second that?
I second that.
I think I got Task Force Member Aviles for the second. Okay. Chair Wilson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Zamopa.
Aye.
Task Force Member Desai.
Aye.
Task Force Member Morton.
Aye.
Task Force Member Separock.
Aye.
Task Force Member Washington.
Aye.
And Task Force Member Aviles.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Just want to lift a question I threw in the chat, didn't want to interrupt the vote, but just procedurally, are the listening sessions that are off meeting dates going to be recorded, and do they require quorum?
Yes, I believe they will require quorum. The virtual session, we can, I believe, because that June 28th date is the schedule for your regular meeting. So that will be recorded, but I can follow up to figure out what that in-person session would look like in terms of recording.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, team. That was a lot of work to get that date, but dates, but we did it. All right, let's move on to agenda number 8, items from staff. Jasmine, Andy.
Yes, just a reminder again, for our June meeting on June 28th, so the virtual listening session, that entire meeting will be virtual. Before we thought we would be in person at Plummer Park, but the city clerk advised all of the liaisons to let our members know that at this point we're going to stay virtual because of the rising number of cases.
Thank you for that. All right, item number 9. This is going to be a request for public comment on matters not on the agenda. Anybody wish to speak? So I'm going to read through this. This time is set aside for public comment. The public is given the opportunity to address the Social Justice Task Force on any item within its responsibility pursuant to the Brown Act. Sorry, within its responsibility. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Social Justice Task Force cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. Each speaker will be allotted 2 minutes and time may be limited or increased based on discretion of the task force. This public comment period is to address the Social Justice Task Force on agenda items and or items of general interest within the jurisdiction of the Social Justice Task Force. If there's anyone who didn't sign up to speak and wish to provide comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Is there anybody that would like to speak on matters not on the agenda? All right. Let's move on to item number 10. Task Force Liaison reports. Are there any reports that the Task Force liaisons would like to discuss? All right. I guess the next piece is going to be around items from task force members and subcommittee reports. I believe we've done a very deep dive. Are there additional items that task force members or subcommittees would like to provide? We are just cruising through this. So our favorite part of the meeting after we've talked about all of our great stuff is item number 12, adjournment. So the Social Justice Task Force will adjourn to its next regular meeting on Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 at 6 p.m. But like Jasmine said, it is now going to be held virtually and not in person. So please ignore that on your agenda, and we will see you again at the same bat time on June 28th virtually. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.